The Medes did what no one in the ancient world believed was possible. They destroyed an empire that had ruled the known world for 3 centuries through a combination of military genius, technological superiority, and systematic terror. The Assyrian Empire at its peak stretched from Egypt in the west to the borders of Persia in the east. It had conquered Babylon. It had conquered Egypt. It had conquered every civilization it had ever touched. And yet in 612 BCE it was gone. Not gradually, not slowly, but suddenly, catastrophically, and completely. The people who did it were mountain warriors who had spent generations paying tribute to the very empire they would destroy. This is the story of how the Medes rose from nothing to destroy history's first superpower, and what it tells us about the nature of power that has never changed. To understand why the fall of Assyria was so shocking to the ancient world, you first need to understand what the ancient Near East looked like before Assyria dominated it. The ancient Near East was a world of competing civilizations. Babylon in the south, Elam to the east, the small Levantine kingdoms along the Mediterranean coast, Egypt to the southwest, Urartu in the Armenian highlands. These civilizations had been competing, trading, and fighting each other for 2,000 years before Assyria dominated them all. What made Assyria different was not simply that it conquered. Many ancient states conquered their neighbors. What made Assyria different was that it conquered everything. Systematically, permanently, and with a deliberate use of terror that had no precedent in the ancient world. Assyria built the ancient world's first truly professional army, and understanding that army is essential to understanding how the Medes eventually defeated it. Before Assyria, ancient armies were largely seasonal affairs, farmers who fought in the summer and went home for the harvest. Assyria created a standing professional army. Soldiers who did nothing except train, fight, and prepare for the next campaign. Their weapons were iron. At a time when bronze was still the standard metal for weapons across most of the ancient world, Assyrian soldiers carried iron swords, iron-tipped spears, and iron-reinforced shields. They invented the cavalry charge as a military tactic. Before Assyria, horses were used to pull chariots. The Assyrians were among the first to develop mounted archers who rode into battle and used the horse's speed and mobility as a weapon in itself. But of all Assyrian military innovations, the one that most changed the ancient world was the siege engine. Before the Assyrians, a walled city was a nearly impregnable position. Besieging armies could only starve it out, which took months or years and was costly for the besieger. The Assyrian siege engine changed this completely. It could batter walls into rubble in days. The Assyrians also developed the practice of digging beneath walls, undermining their foundations until the wall collapsed. And when the walls fell, the Assyrian policy of what followed was a military strategy in itself. Populations were deported. Entire peoples were moved hundreds of miles from their homelands and resettled in different parts of the empire. This was deliberate policy. By moving populations, the Assyrians destroyed the cultural and ethnic basis for future rebellions. A people without their homeland, surrounded by strangers, was a people who could not organize resistance. The Medes are one of the most important and least understood peoples in the ancient world. They were an Iranian people, speaking an early Iranian language related to Persian, who inhabited the mountain ranges and highland valleys of what is today western Iran. Unlike the great river valley civilizations of Mesopotamia, Babylon, Sumer, Akkad, the Medes did not build great cities or leave behind extensive written records. Their power was in their people, in the warrior culture that mountain living produced, in the horsemanship that the Iranian plateau gave them. The Medes appear in Assyrian records as early as the 9th century BCE. As enemies, as tribute payers, and as victims of repeated Assyrian military campaigns. For over 2 centuries, the Medes paid tribute to Assyria. Their young men were taken as soldiers for the Assyrian army. Their horses were taken. Their grain was taken. Assyrian kings boasted in their inscriptions of campaigns into Median territory, burning villages, destroying crops, carrying off populations. The Medes tried to resist. Multiple times they rebelled. Multiple times Assyrian armies came back and crushed the rebellion. But each rebellion left something behind: knowledge, experience, understanding of how Assyrian armies moved, where they were strong, where they were vulnerable. And through all these years of subjugation, the Medes were watching, learning, developing the military capability that they would eventually turn against the empire that had been educating them in warfare for 2 centuries. The Medes also had something the Assyrians did not fully appreciate: their mountains. Every time the Assyrian army came into the mountains to punish a Median rebellion, it was slower, less maneuverable, and more vulnerable than it was on the Mesopotamian plain where it had never been defeated. The man who transformed the Medes from a collection of mountain tribes into an empire-destroying military power was named Cyaxares. He came to power around 625 BCE. He inherited a Median people that had been humiliated, exploited, and repeatedly crushed for 2 centuries. The first thing he did was reorganize the Median military. He replaced the traditional tribal levy, every clan providing fighters in their own fashion, with a professional standing army organized along functional lines. Spearmen, archers, cavalry, each arm of the military organized, trained, and equipped consistently. He did this by copying the Assyrians. The people he intended to destroy had been his military school for 2 centuries, and he had been an excellent student. But military reform alone was not enough. Cyaxares was realistic enough to understand that even a reformed Median army could not defeat Assyria alone. He needed an ally. He found one in Babylonia. Babylon had been conquered by Assyria multiple times. It had been sacked. It had been humiliated. Its culture and religion had been deliberately suppressed by Assyrian kings who saw Babylonian civilization as a political threat. The Babylonian king Nabopolassar had rebelled against Assyria and established the Neo-Babylonian Empire. He needed allies to survive. In approximately 614 BCE, Cyaxares and Nabopolassar met and formed an alliance. The alliance was sealed with a marriage. Cyaxares' granddaughter Amytis married Nabopolassar's son Nebuchadnezzar. It was this alliance that would destroy Assyria. And legend says it was the homesickness of Amytis for her mountain home that caused Nebuchadnezzar to build the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, to make her feel at home. The campaign that would end the Assyrian Empire began not with the great cities but with the ancient heartland. In 614 BCE, the Median army descended from the Zagros mountains and attacked the ancient city of Ashur. Ashur was not just a city. It was the religious capital of the Assyrian Empire, the city of the god Ashur, the supreme deity of the Assyrian pantheon, from whom the empire took its name. When the Medians attacked Ashur, the Babylonian army was still on its way. The Medes took the city without them. When Nabopolassar arrived, he found Ashur already taken. The 2 allies held a formal ceremony at the ruins of the religious capital of the empire they were destroying. 2 years later, in 612 BCE, the combined Median and Babylonian armies turned toward the greatest prize, Nineveh, the largest city in the ancient world, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, home to the palace of Ashurbanipal and the greatest library in the ancient world. The walls of Nineveh were extraordinary, over 12 kilometers in circumference, 8 enormous gated entrances, 15 massive fortified towers. The allied army surrounded the city and began the siege. The Assyrian defenders fought back. For 3 months the walls held. Then the Tigris flooded. Ancient accounts say the floodwaters undermined sections of the wall. Then the walls gave way. The Median and Babylonian forces poured through. The Assyrian king Sin-shar-ishkun died in the burning palace. The accounts say he set it on fire himself rather than fall into the hands of his enemies. Nineveh burned for weeks. The fall of Nineveh did not immediately end the Assyrian Empire. A remnant force under Ashur-uballit II retreated west and tried to rebuild. They established a rump state at Haran in what is today southeastern Turkey. Egypt came to Assyria's aid. Pharaoh Necho II marched north to support what remained of the Assyrian state. But the Babylonians intercepted the Egyptian force at the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BCE. Carchemish was a decisive Babylonian victory. The Egyptian army was shattered. The Assyrian remnant was finished. The Assyrian Empire had lasted approximately 3 centuries in its Neo-Assyrian form. It ended so completely that within a generation, the sites of its great cities were being forgotten. The fall of Assyria created a power vacuum that immediately reshaped the entire ancient Near East. Babylon entered its greatest period. The Neo-Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar became the dominant power of the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar completed the construction of the Ishtar Gate, the Hanging Gardens, and rebuilt the Great Ziggurat, known in the Bible as the Tower of Babel. The Median Empire became the dominant power from western Iran to Anatolia. But the Median Empire would not last long. Within a generation it would be conquered by a people who had also been subjects of the Assyrians, the Persians. The Persians would go on to build an empire even larger than Assyria's. And they would explicitly claim the legacy of both Babylon and Media as the foundations of their own imperial identity. And Assyria itself, the greatest military power the ancient world had known, vanished so completely that by the time the Greek historian Herodotus wrote about the ancient world in the 5th century BCE, the great cities of Assyria had already been forgotten under the desert. It would take until the 19th century CE, over 2,000 years after the fall of Nineveh, for archaeologists to find the ruins of the Assyrian cities and understand what they had been. The winged bull guardians, the palace reliefs, the library of Ashurbanipal with its 30,000 clay tablets. The Medes left almost nothing behind. Their empire was absorbed by the Persians. Their cities remain largely unexcavated. Their written records are almost non-existent. But what the Medes did changed the world forever. They proved that no empire, however powerful, however established, however feared, is permanent. The most powerful military force in the ancient world was brought down by a mountain people who had been paying tribute to it just one generation before. That is the lesson the Medes taught history. And it is a lesson that every empire since has had to learn again, usually the hard way.